Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Aspiring Lawyer's Guide, where we speak to lawyers from different backgrounds to hopefully give you some inspiration and help you understand their career paths and choices that they've taken. And today we've got a very special guest, a personal friend of mine, the CEO of KSI Law, which is a law firm focused on creditor rights. It's a mid-sized firm which has multiple locations, and it's got approximately 50 staff. Is that right? About 50 staff now working there. And so, Yuce Baykara, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. It's going to be super fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dig right into it. Let's start. We'll get to KSI Law eventually, but I want to kind of wind back, go through your career path. But even before your career path, I'd like to start with your education. So where did you go to law school? Let's talk about that, and let's talk about the licensing process in Canada.
I love how that's an open-ended question because for your viewers, we went to law school together, which is the interesting part of this story. And we kind of started exactly at the same point together and then kind of went down similar paths and went there. But yeah, I went to University of Manchester. The only deviance in what I did from your end of it was I ended up doing an exchange, if you remember. Remember I left in second year?
That's right.
And then I ended up at the University of North Carolina because I was like, I want to go to US law school, which was a completely different experience than the UK. And like I've told stories year over year and people don't understand like that's it. And then finished off in England, and I know most of your viewers are in the NCA kind of path of things. So the idea was let's go back to Canada and deal with licensing, but that was 2011, and let's be honest, it was a little horrific at that time. It was like the Wild West when it comes to
yeah, a little bit. There was. I remember around that time the syllabus for administrative law was something like read this whole textbook and that was it.
Yeah.
There were no sections. There were no, so it wasn't what it is today. Certainly there were no notes available. There were no, nobody was offering courses and stuff like that. So it was a completely different landscape. But rather than go through the NCA process, you did something different.
Yeah, we were sitting in our apartment, my roommate and I, which Byron Morello, and we were like, what do we do to like completely circumvent this NCA process? We're like, this doesn't make sense to us. So we decided to apply for a master's degree, which was it was partially coursework. So it was like dissertation and coursework, and it was important. And we're like, let's apply to a master's at U of T and see what we can do to kind of alleviate the NCA pressure. And once we got accepted, we decided to apply to the NCA and see what what exams we had to take. And then we mapped our courses in our master's degree to essentially the NCA courses, and then reapplied after the completion of those to see if we actually had to take the NCA. And it was like the most brilliant plan at the time ever, because we're like, we might as well get credit for our masters and our NCA at the same time.
That's
and
right.
when I say Wild West, it was like double counted. That's what I mean by Wild West. So.
Yeah. So for our audience, I mean, of course, this was before the time of those very expensive common law LLMs. They didn't exist at the time. And so you were doing a standard LLM, but which law school did you go to?
U of T. So I went to University of Toronto.
That's right.
So you ended up going to University of Toronto, but
I did
and you're right. There was no GP LLM. There was no LLM in common. Like this was way before any of this. To date myself, which again, my hair is all white now and deep in my career on that one. So, but it was more of a how do we take the education and the things that we've learned and apply them. And what I mean by that, not the course, apply our legal thinking to get to the end result. And that was, can we use this LLM to circumvent a piece of a requirement? Because you're right, the course syllabuses in the NCAs they weren't structured. There was no notes. It was legitimately, here's a textbook, read it, and we're going to ask you a bunch of questions. And it made no sense to me. I'm like, you can't test my knowledge of something that you don't even tell me what you're testing me, right? So if we did it, like I did administrative law in my master's, and it was way more structured, multiple papers, everything like that. But it was the idea of, I'm going to get the course credits, and I'm also going to get the NCA credit for it. So that was kind of the notion behind it. And that kind of led to, your interaction with NCA too, because the bar indice notes and all that kind of came from that like area, and it was kind of being passed around. And I remember we passed a bunch of them around, and you started tutoring then too. So there's some interaction there, which again led to what you're doing. But I think the most important thing to highlight is you and I both recognized there was no space for people like us in a sense, right? We were internationally trained, and we were kind of left to our own devices, and we kind of have a good story when it comes to that too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we have different experiences at U of T as well, because I joined U of T a couple of years after you, but I had already finished the NCA process, and I'd already been a licensed lawyer in New York when I came back to the University of Toronto to kind of go down the education stream, which was, the reason, I was doing it. But I had a focus in business law. Did you do any of the focuses when you were there? I don't know if they offered them at the time. I think it was quite new, where they started like streaming LLM in certain fields. So I think they had like two or three different ones.
Yeah. No, I'm way dated. Like our like I say, our because Byron as well, but my program was strictly like coursework plus dissertation, and the notion was like the old school master's degree, like do a lot of research, write a book, that type of stuff, which, it led to kind of more fruitful thinking in the sense of law, and it's helped me later on in my career, which I didn't realize then. But no, there wasn't like a stream. So that's why, going full circle on that statement of it being a free-for-all, because they allowed us to pick our courses in a freehand, and we could go and do the JD courses. There's a lot of, prominent lawyers that you see on LinkedIn that are being, advertised in Toronto, who are doing amazing things. I went to school with them. I at least get to say, I've litigated, I've went to school with these people. Mm-hmm. So I got exposure in that Canadian system. Mm-hmm. So even though it was a shorter period of time, I don't feel left out in a sense. Like I had my JD experience as well. So
yeah, and that was the case, a few years after you left, because there were no LLM courses except for the research course, right? That was teaching you how to research and write. Everything else was JD courses that you took, except we were limited. So a couple years after you, we were limited to upper year JD courses only. We could not take things like administrative law, criminal law, and those stuff. So we had to take the upper year courses. Yeah, but anyway, you got what you needed from it, so that was good. But having that experience, in the UK, in the US, and in Canada, would you say that the US and Canada are closer in terms of the style of education and writing and expectations, or is UK and Canada closer? What's your experience been?
I think they share core nuances. Like, when you hear those statements of like Western education and like, I want to get a good, they all have fundamentally the same teachings, like competencies, where they teach the foundation. They kind of drill in a little bit like of a topical specialty, and then ask you to demonstrate that understanding. Mm-hmm. So I'll say that. But the delivery and the way and the teaching style are so different in all three. Okay. And I'll give you an example. The UK is very theory focused, where it's you take the book, you read it, you kind of interact with the people in your class, and then everything's piled on at the end in an exam or a paper, right? Very, very, very strict. Yeah. In Canada, there's kind of they bridge the when I say bridge the gap, they bridge the knowledge, where they make you do smaller projects, and then they kind of just like pile it on at the end as well. They do like the larger exams. The US, now I know they eliminated it, but that the things you see in the movies when people go to US law school, the interaction between the teachers, read the case law, interact back and forth with the class.
Socratic method.
Legit. Socratic.
Yeah.
That is legitimately how they did it. Right. And you know what? When you're on the spot and you do it the first time, like I remember, you're sweating buckets, you're losing it. You're like, oh my God. But it actually prepares you in your professional life. So there is value to it because it's the first time you're exposed to it. But before I got into this business role, I was a litigator. So when you're on the spot in court, you have a judge literally asking you questions on the spot, no materials in front of you, in the exact same way. So when you're in practice, that method, you kind of feel comfortable. Like that comfortable feeling comes into play. And that's the difference in the US. Now, the other thing in the US, and I tell this story to everybody, LexisNexis does business in Canada, the US, and the UK, right? Mm-hmm. The one thing they do differently in the US, and I remember this, is when we were in an exam and you needed case law, you'd write it on like a Post-it note, and there was a runner in each class, and they would run to the Lexis station in our law school, print out the case for you, and run back with highlights so you could do it, just like a junior associate.
No way. That's incredible.
So they designed the law school function as almost like a law firm, because their goal is not for you to fail the exam. It's not for you to not like show the competency. Their goal is for you to operate like a proper professional in the same similar environment you would in a law firm. And that's one of the major differences in the US.
Interesting. That's
cool.
That's pretty cool.
They also do Starbucks runs. I remember that. I'm like, I need coffee.
During your exam?
During your exam? And I give it legitimately run Starbucks for you. I'm like, cool. Thanks for the latte.
Incredible. Amazing. And, you know, that experience, I guess, it was really valuable then going to the U.S. and getting that experience, because I don't think Canada's, you know, at least from what I saw in the JD program, not that way. Okay.
No, not at all. Like, just so your viewers can understand, the tuition is what like bridges the difference. Like when we went, and again, this is dating us, I think our international tuition was what, like in the 12 to 15,000 pounds roughly, something like that, which equated.
The UK, you mean?
In the UK, yeah.
10 and a half.
Something like that.
10 and a half.
Something like that.
10 and a half.
Sure.
Yeah.
And this is like 2008, so like the global recession happened, and I think we ended up paying like 1-to-1 for it at some point. Yeah. But Canada's about 30. I think that was the number, 30 to 40 now, roughly. In the US, it's like 90 a year, right? But you get what you pay for, right? There's that layer of like, they give you iPads, they give you laptops, they want you to succeed. Like, it's not that you're paying for the mark, you're paying for the opportunity and the network. And I'm sorry I'm hyping up the US, but I want people to know the difference. It's very business focused, and you know, when we talk about business later, there's a reason why, and it kind of changed my thinking in this one. So the UK is very theoretical. Canada has some practicality. The US is very business focused.
Interesting. Let's turn the page and shift our focus then to career, because business was not your first, your first go-to. You were in law for a while, actually. So start us off with, you know, where'd you article? How did that come about? If you can recall that far back.
I know our article. I remember I told the story to do you know Gina Alexandria? She's like Alexandria. She's like the advocate for NC. So she was a professor, and I'm gonna say like something in the guidance of getting like lawyers at UFT when I was there. Like she was actually like an actual like scholar, and she ended up moving to the Ministry of Attorney General in Ontario the year after we finished, and she ended up recruiting out a bunch of people for projects, and I'm talking like 10 to 15 of us out of that program that she took directly into. So I ended up articling at the Attorney General's office, and I worked on like big, like, and I say big, multi-billion-dollar class actions. And for a internationally trained lawyer, I'm not call myself that. I think that's fair. It was kind of like, it was a big deal. It was like, oh my God, I actually get to like work somewhere legitimate where, you know, students in Canada who do OCIs and all that get the opportunities, and I'm sitting there saying, hey, hi guys, like I'm here too, like thanks for the opportunity. And it's important to note because I interviewed all the major Bay Street law firms, like UFT and my international experience got me in there. But I only ended up learning later on in my career why I didn't get that job. And we'll talk about the business of law because I'm a big advocate of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I got that chance, and I articled at the Crown. I was there for just under a year, and then that project kept going. So right after I got called to the bar, I ended up staying at the ministry for another year and a half, and I worked in the legal department of the Ministry of Community and Social Services, doing kind of like a bridge out of what we did at the Attorney General's office.
Mm-hmm.
And it was valuable experience because I got to meet very high up officials. I met the Premier, won awards. Like I did the full gambit, but what the takeaway I got was I learned how to be a litigator. They trained me of how to be an in-court litigator because they only brought in the best litigators to do these multi-billion-dollar class actions. And I got to watch and learn from them. So when people are like, well, where'd you start your career and where'd you do it? That's where I started. That's how I learned to be as cutthroat as you possibly could be, because
from government.
This moniker that government lawyers are like taking like they're nice. That's not true. Like they will cut your throat when they need to.
Did you see a distinction between being an articling student, because MAG, were you at MAG, the Ministry of Attorney General, right? So MAG is probably the number one employer in terms of the number of articling students that they take. So I'm sure there's a big bullpen where everybody's working versus, working as an associate there. What are some of the major differences, if you can tell us?
When you say bullpen, like they had a floor for us. Like it wasn't even a bullpen. Like they legitimately had they got a floor of a building because there were so many of us, and they gave us offices. And I'm like, I'm an articling student. Like, well, why do I have a corner office on Bay Street? This is ridiculous. And that's kind of like the cool idea of how they entice people, which was great. And each of us were, cogs in a wheel. I think that's the best way to describe it. Mm-hmm. And it depended the articling principle that you had. Like I was lucky enough that I had a cool one, and she taught us, things in litigation that most wouldn't. And her experience came from private practice. And what you saw and what we learned in government is they take a lot of younger lawyers in, and they train them very well. But the goal is not to have them stay long term. Then they let them go out to private practice. And then when they get to a certain vintage, as I like to call, then they call them back in so they can do the end of their career. Like call it a retirement, but it's more like you've done the business end of everything. Come do some really cool, interesting constitutional stuff and the government related things. So there is a distinction. What's missing at the time, there's no like middle class in the government. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what led to going into private practice, because they encourage that. There's a lot you learn in private practice, especially about how to like deal with clients and dealing with the business of law. So
interesting. And for students who are still thinking about, I know this has been a while for you, but the bar exams and all that stuff, how flexible is MAG in giving you study time? Are they giving you, just the minimal that's required by the Law Society, or were they very, were they very?
They were
nice?
really good.
Yeah,
they were really good to us. They gave us 2 weeks off per exam because it's in their best interest, and they paid for it. So there's nothing more I could say about if there's an opportunity to go to MAG. Again, it's the largest employer in Ontario when it comes to like the law firm related things. And there's a cast of characters there that you will learn the greatest skills in your career that you end up using later on. So the only takeaway that people kind of steer away from is in the salary bands. Everyone says, well, I want to make an X salary. I'm going to say this. A law career is very long. Don't fizzle out in the beginning, right? Focus on the skills that are long-term, and that you'll make your money later, right? And I think that is the takeaway, because I had a lot of friends that went and did the Bay Street jobs at the big firms. They fizzled out really quickly because they burned out really quickly.
Of course, yeah.
And they didn't learn the skills. And perfect example, one of the guys I worked with at MAG, he didn't article at MAG. So he articled at a Bay Street firm. They called him back as a Crown counsel. And he ended up leaving halfway through our first contract term when we were Crown, because he got enticed by a Bay Street firm with Like it was a hefty paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
No bash on him. I'm gonna say this. He's a ninth year associate still,
Mm-hmm.
and he can't make partner because they moved him into a role of support services and litigation, right? Which was what he learned at Med. But because he didn't develop the skills early on in his career to actually litigate and do those things, it took a little bit longer. Eventually you get there, but what I'm saying is don't let the big dollars, entice you. If you are with the right people that can teach you the right skills, the money will come later.
I think that's very useful tip. It's hard to swallow because when you're fresh out of law school and you're very young, you're looking at people like you where you're 10 years plus out of your career and you're like, oh, how did you become you're the CEO, you're probably making a lot of money, that's what I want to do right away. And that's not where your focus should be, right?
Yeah.
We're in different places in our career and you will get there eventually. Okay, but now in your early years, this is when you're supposed to be taking the time to learn as much as you can, and don't worry about the money. If you've got a mentor and you've got somebody who's willing to teach you, then that's more valuable than making a little bit more money up front, especially for the long term, right?
I'm a big advocate of this, and I want to try and explain this. You go to law school and you learn a bunch of skills. You learn how to be a lawyer. You learn how to think like a lawyer. And what I want to convey to your viewership and kind of the exterior world is you become the commodity, right? The legal service provider is what you're selling. My skills as a lawyer is what I'm selling. People come to me and want to do work with me because of what I can do with those skills. I think the misconception is people are like, I'm a lawyer, come hire me. It doesn't work like that, right? You still have to sell something. You're selling yourself as a service. And if you cheat yourself at the beginning of your career and not learn those skills, those hard skills, you won't have a long career, as I like to say, right? You're gonna fizzle out very quickly. You're gonna burn out very quickly, and then you're gonna get to 10, 15 years plus and say, okay, where do I pivot? What do I want to do? Because a law career is very long. You don't want to do all of it in the first 5 years. You want to make sure what you're doing can last decades, and it takes a little bit of time to hone those skills. And people need to remember, you're selling yourself. Learn as much as you can when you have the time, because ultimately we're human, right? Life gets in the way, whether you get married, whether you have children, whether you get sick, an infinite amount of variables can come in the way of this. If you have the time in the beginning to get the skills done, I'm going to be the first advocate to say, learn everything you possibly can really quickly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's pivot back to you. So you left MAG and you went into private practice. Now, how did that dynamic change? And first of all, how did you choose where you wanted to go? Right?
So it's funny, when you're growing up, you hear stories of people and they're like alma maters and all the people they went to school with. It's like, oh, I know this guy. So as your career goes on, these cast of characters you spent these periods of your life with, as we're talking about this now, tend to show up, right? Like they tend to pop back up. So I ended up back into private practice. Do you remember Marcio?
Yes. D'Acunha. Yeah.
Yes. So he texted me. So this is someone we went to law school. He texted me and he was like, hey, I'm working at this creditor rights firm.
Okay.
And we need a lawyer. Do you looking to leave because we need somebody who has litigation skills? So this goes back to learning the skills. He knew of the skills and the things I was learning in MAG and all that stuff. And his boss at the time needed somebody who had those skills, and that's kind of how I ended up in private practice, literally in a firm that does what I do today, but there's a gap of knowledge. And when I say it was a culture shock, like it's a culture shock. Like going from government is one thing, but going from being a student into private practice is very different. It's not what everyone thinks. It's not the things you learned and how you read a book. You have to start to learn how to deal with the clients, how to output what they're expecting, not what you want to do. It's very, very different. And I was thrown into that really early, and it's like, it's not even sink or swim. It's like, make sure you don't sink. Like, it's literally what it was.
And was there anyone there to throw you a life jacket?
No. There people watch Instagram videos and they talk about how no one is coming.
Yeah.
You get to a point in your career, there is no safety. There is no one coming to save you. The only person that you could rely on is yourself. And it's important to note that because it's kind of like this mental coaching, right? Because going through law school is not easy for anybody. And I will say this, if you get through law school, you should congratulate yourself because it is mentally difficult, it is mentally tough, and there are nights, and we both know this, where you doubt your ability and you doubt yourself, right? Let's call a spade a spade.
Absolutely.
Right? That voice does not turn off. I'm 11 years into my career, and trust me when I say that voice doesn't turn off. There's nights when that voice is still going on, and you're still going on and on about it. But when you realize you're the only one that can get you through it, you could do extraordinary things. And when you get to private practice, that imposter syndrome kicks in. That law degree that's on the wall or in a box, it doesn't matter. It's what can you do to the next day and the next day and the next day. And it's just day by day, you kind of keep going and you kind of keep figuring out things. And the skills you learn in law school are important because it's not just the process, it's how you get to the process, right? It's how do I pass my NCAs? How do I pass the bar exam? You're empowered with the ability to learn how to get to the next step, take those skills and keep going forward.
So we didn't plan on talking about this, but I feel like I have to because we were talking about education first. We're talking about skills and the importance of learning those skills very early on. I want to give you one example, and then I want to talk about AI for a moment. I remember teaching in a law school in the UK, and the professor that introduced me to the class where I was teaching says, "You're not allowed to call on students." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You're not allowed to ask them questions." I'm like, excuse me? You literally can't call them out. You can't use the Socratic method of teaching. Perhaps it embarrasses them, or maybe they're not paying attention or something. But I'm used to doing that. I'm used to doing that with my students because I want to make sure they're listening to me. And if they know I can call out on them, I know they're more focused, they're more attentive. Students, and at least in Europe, I spend a lot of time in Europe, and I know in France now they don't give homework anymore in high school because they know you're using AI to do it. All the assignments are done in class now, and so you're losing learning time and stuff like that. But people are relying on AI. What are your thoughts on using AI very early in your career? Do you think you're going to miss out on some important skill sets if you're relying on this technology? And I'm not saying, I know that in practice we do rely on it. There's some great tools out there, but that's different when you've gone ahead and you've done the grunt work in the beginning and you understand the process, right? Do you think it's going to be different, and will there be challenges if people are relying on it so early in their careers?
See, I've kind of dealt with this question in our business end, because we built AI avatars that do settlement. Like I call it our settlement bots. Mm-hmm. And essentially on our disputed matters, anybody could call in and do it, but it's still trained by a lawyer. It thinks like a lawyer. It does all that stuff. So to your point, is there going to be kind of a divide? Absolutely there is, but it's a matter of which side of the line do you want to be on. And it's kind of important because I preach the business of law. And I think in our lifetime, the practice of law and the business of law are going to be two very, very different things. And they're going to start to bridge, where the practice was always the most important thing, but as time goes on, the business is going to kind of take over, because a lot of the things that lawyers do internationally, locally, whatever, are very transactional, and they can become very, very mechanical. And when you take away the mechanical parts of practice, and whether you're relying on AI, automation, and I think the word AI is very romanticized today. Mm-hmm. I think it doesn't define what, like, machine learning versus machine automation, right? There's a divide. But anyways, once you kind of divide that out and focus on what the practice of law is going to be in the future, what those hard skills that lawyers still will need to do. I don't think AI is going to replace the advocacy and the thinking like a lawyer aspect, but AI will replace the transactional end of it. So there will be a period of time where students especially don't know what the difference of the two is. So of course there's going to be abuse of that system, because I don't think in practice we know what that is. And until that is clearly defined, you can't. So the faster you learn what machine learning can do to enhance your skills, right? Not replace, enhance those skills, then you can start to learn what you need to. And we're human. We don't stop learning. And I think that's really important to note. So there will be the abusers. Let's use this as a club point. There will be abusers of AI, but the ones who will succeed in their careers in the long term are the ones that learn how to enhance their skills with AI.
Let's try and dig a little deeper. So, you talk about abusers of AI. What exactly would that? What are the essential skills you have to learn that you shouldn't rely, at least early in your career, you shouldn't rely on AI to do that for you, because then you won't learn those things, right?
Right. Again, practice of law and business of law, two very different things. It will take time for people to learn the business of law, and I hope we can dig deeper into that one, because it's important. That will keep your career long once you understand that. But to understand the practice of law, the skills that any student should hone on is the critical thinking, not analytical. So machine learning can analyze things for you. So an essential lawyer skill that people should start focusing on in the future is the abstract thinking, right? The infinite variable possibilities, because whether it's litigation, M&A, whatever, nothing, if transactional law is taken off the table, house purchases, money transaction, private lending, whatever. If you stick to what needs to be, you need to start thinking abstractly and say, okay, if I have infinite variables and my client wants this as their end result, how do I navigate that? And machine learning can't, in today's LLMs and the worlds that they do, can't do that yet. So the honing skills are the true lawyer advocacy skills that students should focus on, and abstract thinking of the problem, because no one can replace that legal brain, in a sense.
Okay. Is this a good segue to get into KSI? What do you think?
It's a good it's a good segue, but KSI has stories all of its own, right? And I think a lot of your viewers and students should understand how we got here, in a sense, like the business of law end of it, right? It's kind of important. So maybe we can dive deep.
And of course we're skipping a lot of different things that happened in your career. We only talked about your first job out, but really I want to talk about KSI Law. So why don't you tell me, the background before you got into this? What was it? And how did you come up with this concept? And why is it different?
It's a culmination of everything, right? It's almost like my grand opus of everything that I've done in my career. And after I got into private practice, I've always been entrepreneurial, and I realized that to be successful in law, once you see yourself as the service provider or the commodity, you have to start marketing yourself. And when I tell you, for a period of time, like from year 2 of my career to about year 7, I pretty much did anything you could think of. I was like, I got to try everything. If I'm a competent lawyer and I have a lawyer's license, I should be able to do everything, whether it's criminal, whether it's real estate, whether it's, I didn't touch family, but whether it's M&A or private lending, everything. I was like, let me figure out what I'm good at and what I can sell as my services. And when I tell you, my courtroom skills and my advocacy skills came into play very, very quickly in my career, and I'm so thankful I learned them early on. I got that exposure, and I've been to pretty much every level of court in Canada. I've done it all. I'm pretty young in my career. And somewhere in there, I realized I'm not going to spend my career chasing. And I think this is important. I spent too many nights, going out to Chamber of Commerce and meetings. And it's kind of important to learn this, because you're planting seeds. Think of farming, right? You got to plant the seeds, get to know people, meet brokers, meet private lenders. You got to meet everybody so they know who you are. So you become the person in the conversation. And when you plant all those seeds, eventually they start to bloom, or you start to get to the harvest, as I like to call it. But what I realized is you don't want to be chasing your next paycheck. You don't want to be chasing your next meal. So you want to be stationary and sell a service that people come to you. You want to completely reverse it and say, I have a superior product right here, right? Come and let me service your superior product. And that's kind of what I realized in that. So KSI kind of started indirectly inside of another law firm. So I worked as a partner at a mid-sized firm in Mississauga for many years. And the idea was they didn't have a creditor rights division or a bankruptcy division. It was very small, and they recruited me and said, come in, we have a small book of business. We'll be happy if you can, service this and make it 30. I think the number was like $30,000 a month. That they set that as the high bar. And somewhere in there, I'm like, wait a second. I want to service creditors, right? I want to do the complete opposite. I want to go to the place that there's essentially unlimited amounts of work to do, because creditors are lending and giving out and selling and all that stuff. So I said, okay, what can we do with this? What can we do with this idea and make it bigger, right? So your viewership guys, whether it's mortgage lending, private lending, commodities, leasing, auto, machinery, those types of things. Mm-hmm. And we took that book, and I said, okay, let's grow it to 30. Within COVID happened somewhere in there as well, which everyone talks about, but it was a good thing. It gave me the opportunity to pivot and say, I want to grow this. I want to make it bigger. And that's when there's a lot of money on the street, a lot of lending, a lot of CERB loans and SEBA loans that were running around, and somewhere in that they have to retract that and get it back, right? How do you get the money back? Well, you got to call guys like me who can get money from a stone, in a sense. But the idea was not, let me take the law firm model. I didn't want the idea of I'm going to go to a law firm and get a lawyer and hopefully that lawyer can get it. No, I want to make a mechanized product, right? A commodity that goes out and says, we will do X, we will liquidate X, we will provide this legal, so we will do all of this thing in a nice, neat package. And think of the ideas of Apple. You go to the Apple store, you buy a new product, you get the nice box and the shiny, and you don't remember what's in the box. You remember the service, you remember how you got it, you remember that experience. So I said, how do I wrap this idea into a client experience that is far superior than everyone else's? Because people come back to that. People romanticize. It doesn't matter the end result, right? They don't care about the end result. They care about the process and the journey, in a sense. So we kind of did that, and we built it inside of another law firm. And my high bar was $30,000 a month. And near the end of it, we got to $850,000. Something so completely ridiculous that even the senior partners of this firm were like, what do we do with this? They didn't know what to do. It was so foreign to them. And kind of the little sparks flew in my head, the entrepreneurial sparks of well, wait a second, I can kind of do this myself, right? Mm-hmm. I'm the one that created the systems. I'm the created the mechanism. I created the war machine. But where my mindset change was, my definition of client experience was very different than the law firm's definition of client experience, right? The traditional billable hour model, the traditional here's the service you get. I can't get a hold of my lawyer. I email them, they'll call me back a week and a half later. No. I was like, no, I want expert service, expertise of the people talking about the products. So that's kind of where KSI came from. So the name in itself is that. So it came from kind of the German word of creditor. So KSI stands for Creditor Services Incorporated, but it's creditor with a K. Mm-hmm. Just came from that. And the sheer idea of it is, how do I provide the best client experience to my creditor clients? Because we deal with such large scale things that they want the human interaction. They don't want the answer on 1,000 files. And we do that high level. We're not doing singular files, we're doing mass. Mm-hmm. But they want the experience, and that is what I'm obsessed with. I preach that. I'm like, the business of law is the client experience, and the client will come back if the experience is perfect.
That's incredible. And it didn't happen overnight. This has been many years of experiencing, and you had the opportunity, maybe not your first couple of years, but you had the opportunity to be client facing for quite a while now. and you understood that and you figured it out.
Yeah, and I mean, if there's any advice I could give on that, like the entrepreneurial end of law, it's not for everybody. And I say that with a caveat warning, because there's periods of time you go, and again, you're an entrepreneur, you understand it, where you don't know where the next paycheck is coming from, right? You don't know what's going to happen, because it's not a traditional 9 to 5 model. If you're lucky enough to have a firm that supports that growth, then great, take it and run, but make sure you don't sit behind a desk and cheat yourself. And what I mean by that is, if you don't learn how to get a client first, you won't know what to do with it. And like I said, it's not for everybody. Like this whole idea of like the rainmakers and firms and the workers, there's some people that are very good at doing the work and they're very comfortable. And for me to get to the position I'm in, I need people like that, right? It's kind of a harmonious relationship. Because to be out there, to be client-facing, you learn what not to say, what not to do, what to do. But you can't be stuck behind a desk 15 hours a day doing paperwork to do that. So you need people to support. It's kind of... But like you said, you don't get here overnight. You don't know where you're gonna go until you start to do it. And what you realize is people are on that 9 to 5 schedule, which is great, but you realize that you as the entrepreneur, your commodity is your time and the service, right? So you want to make sure you fill your time up with the experiences and the people that you have that you know will actually become something later on. Right? It doesn't happen the next day. It might take years. You might have somebody you meet, and we're 25. Like I had a client, I met him in 2017. He didn't call me until like 24. But that one interaction, what is that? 7 years before, would like resonate, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. So when I say the entrepreneurial end of this is not for, it's not. A lot of people say they can do it, and they get to that black, as I like to call it. They sail into the black end of it, where you don't know if you're coming out the other end, and you don't know what's coming next. But if you have the will, like I said, you have the will to go through law school, if you have the will to hang on through that uncomfortable season, all the good stuff comes later. But the other warning that comes with that one is when all the good stuff comes, what do you do with it? Right? You can lose it really, really quickly as well, because it comes and goes. And so you want to make sure you're planting for the next season. You want to make sure your service level is up there to keep the clients coming back.
Tell me about the KSI experience, because you talked about this client experience, but I'm not quite sure. I'm a client. I come to you. What am I going to get from you that's different from, some other firm or your traditional law firm in terms of, billables and hourly and stuff like that?
Right. So because we serve creditors, we understand that it's a mass volume game. And what we mean by that is most creditors don't have one file or two files. Most creditors who lend out cash, who lend out or sell services, commodity, they do mass scale. So to them, they don't want to be bogged down with billable hours on the singular files. They would rather deal with it as a collective and say, deal with this mass problem of mine and get back to me with something. And a lot of our clients is, how do I get our money back? That's mostly what their problem is. Or how do I get my equipment back? And our model is very different because it's very contingency based, right? I don't want to give you a product that I don't back. So my client experience that I'm selling is, you're not paying me unless I'm collecting what it is your problem is, right? Whether it's I'm putting the security on, whether I'm repoing the material, whether I'm garnishing, I'm selling a house. I mean, for the sake of argument, I've repoed a horse before, I've taken boats, like we've done all that type of stuff. But most clients don't want to pay for something that they can't tangibly get, they can't tangibly see. So when they see a bill and they're like, oh, I answered an email. No, our end is the end result. So we pack the experience to get to that end result, so that at the end of it, when it's all said and done, and we need to be paid for our services, there's no question, right? And our staff is available, your documents are available at all material times. And that's the experience that clients are looking for. They're looking for value for the service, but a superior service. And they don't want to be hounded with bills and money on the moment you meet them. And that's what's different about us.
So that means you're available to your big clients by phone anytime, anywhere. You've got your phone on.
Literally, and I might be on vacation. I have a story. I was on vacation in Florida, and one of my clients in British Columbia, we had a problem. I was literally on the next flight out of Orlando, flying to Vancouver, and I'm telling you, that is not a fun flight.
So what you're saying is, because not just working on the legal side, I've also worked on the customer side. Years ago, I was in the cannabis industry, and I was hiring counsel. I had upwards of 15 law firms working for me. And I remember one of my lawyers in Arizona, and it just blew my mind. He goes, I don't charge for phone calls, emails, photocopies. You're not going to see any of that from me. He goes, I don't want you to worry that, I'm going to be billing you, if I pick up the phone to call me. You can call me anytime. And that experience that I got as on the client side, I started shifting all my work to that law firm, because the person, wasn't nitpicking at each thing. I didn't like that. He was always there for me. He was always listening to my issues, and he was great at mediating and settling and finding solutions that were kind of out of the box. And I guess this whole experience is out of the box too, because law firms are not used to this. And I've been, I've seen, and I'm a client of law firms, and I see that happening, and it's very annoying and frustrating. Like you said, you get this crazy bill, nothing's been done yet, and they're like, email this, 0.6, email that, or 0.1, sorry. They break it down into, anyway. It changed everything for me. And I still remember that experience from that law firm. I still remember that. And I think that's a great model. And I think people should start, the traditional law firm should be dying. We'll see. I don't know.
Well, this goes into the conversation, right? If you can automate or take a transactional end of the business and make it into a streamline or a war machine, as I like to call it. And what I mean by that is like it's a mechanical aspect of it. It comes down to, like you said, the client experience, right? And the superiority of that product. You telling me that story is important, and what people can kind of convey from that is, because of that availability, because of the fact that the way you build it, you didn't care what the end result was, did you? No. That's my point. People, the human experience is, if I see a bill and I see all these things, it's like, you did all this, I didn't see any of it, but I got nothing at the end of it. That's where it is. So we realize that, and I'm going to grab my phone. People see phones as a crux, right? This work-life balance. There is a balance, but there's also taking a phone, which is a communication tool. And I remember the keynote speech by Steve Jobs when he introduced the iPhone, right? Because the cell was a phone, an email communicator, and an iPod, right? But now it does so much more. You can run your entire practice and be available anywhere in the world. There is no excuse at this point. And it's so funny because most of my clients they want to pick up the phone and talk to me for an hour. A phone call can be 2 minutes. What's going on here? Give me an update, send me a text, and that's it. And I'm done. I don't need to say anything else after that. And if I make that information available to them and that experience, then it's not costing me nothing to have a spreadsheet or information on a back-end portal, because in today's technology age, all that stuff is easy to set up, right? It's simple. And if they can go log into that 3 o'clock in the morning when they're looking, that's the experience. They love that stuff. That's what they want. So they can have information accessible, and they just like to know my lawyer or the people I work with or the business people are accessible to me at any time. So people going through their career learn the balance of your life, but also understand that they're not, like, most people are not looking for long-term interaction. It's very short. It's very quick. It's so funny how far a little text message that's 2 lines saying, I'll call you tomorrow at 9 a.m. can go. It's really fun. It's really freaking simple.
Yeah. Incredible. Well, I think you've given us You've given us a lot to think about, and I think this has been a very candid conversation. And you've gone, unreserved for us, so that's nice. Um,
I won't bite my tongue because it's not the business end of what we try to do. It's pretty. Like you see the Instagram clips of the Porsches and the yachts, and like it's pretty on some, and then there's
yeah,
some days that are nasty, really nasty.
that's like any business, though. And,
So
um, how about this? How is the business of law different than other businesses? Is there an answer to that?
I
I kind of surprised you
there
with this
is.
one. I didn't.
You're surprised at what? That there is an
No,
answer?
no, I'm saying I'm surprising you with this question. This wasn't a
Oh
planned
no,
question,
not a
so
surprise.
keeping you on
I
your feet.
tackled this one.
Yeah.
So the business of law is very different because the regulators and the old guard, and this is going to be as controversial as it gets. I'm going to say this statement, and I don't really care how it
Yeah.
comes off. The old guard mix up the practice of law with the business of law. And the world, not Canada, has seen a change in this. So in the UK, the business law firms are run like businesses, where there's C-level guys, outside direct investment, VCs, and they're creating products and services that they can sell exterior, right? Here in Canada, the practice of law is still kind of molded with the business of law. So it's highly restricted to save itself from itself, right? So there's a lot of controversy right now with the law societies in Canada that are trying to keep themselves relevant. Again, like I told you, this is going to be a very controversial point. And it's kind of against the mandate of access to justice, right? Because the governments here are trying to mandate access to justice, but the law societies are trying to stop it. And what I mean by that is you're taking the transactional things with AI and very businessy things and limiting their ability. So it's hard to provide services around those restrictions. But if you're smart enough to see that divide, you find ways around it. So to grow a business of a legal practice is very, very hard. I would love one day, knock on wood, if I can get these shackles taken off, because we could do some really cool things and we could provide some really cool services in the broad spectrum. So that's my answer.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Yuji. It's been a great talk. How do we find you? How do people find you? Your firm? It's on your shirt?
Simple. It's on my shirt. www.ksi.law. If you're a
Yes.
creditor, we'd love to talk to you. That's what we do best.
Incredible. Okay, good. And we're going to put it in our description as well. We're going to put up some links and stuff like that to your firm. Really appreciate you, talking to us, talking to students who were, who are in the shoes you were in many years ago, over a decade ago. And I think the advice you've given us, roll up your sleeves, learn the hard things first. Don't think about the money. The money will come eventually, but learn those things. You want to learn it as early as possible, as quick as possible, so that nothing is holding you back, because you don't want to get into a position where you should know these things already at this point, right? And you might get stuck. From what I gather from, some of the examples you've given us, people get stuck in certain places because they didn't have the background that they should have had at this point. So, and then of course life happens, right? And I've got a wife, I've got 4 kids now. My life is a bit chaotic. I mean, it's wonderful. It's great. But my career is not my number one thing at the moment. It's life, right? And being with my kids, being present, so things change. And if I had to learn at this point in time, it would be very difficult too, because I'd be taking away from that family time, which
Right.
10 years down the road, you want to say, okay, I've worked really hard for 10 years, right? I've built this thing. It's kind of running a little bit on its own. Yes, it still needs me, but it needs me on a different level. You're not there for the the minute details anymore, the little problem. Oh, we haven't filed this. We haven't. People should be taking care of that at that point. Hopefully, right? If you're in the entrepreneurial world, that's what you're aiming for. I think one of the things you should be aiming for is to, how do I get to a point where I'm comfortable and I can sit back a bit and things work already on their own. So
I'm going to add one point to this, and I know we're limited time, but Kevin O'Leary said this, and it's really important. And I want people to go and find his podcast on this one. I think he was on like the CEO Diary or something. The partner you choose in life is the single most important decision you're going to make, right? And I'm going to say this: my wife, without her, I wouldn't be able to get this, right? I have twin boys. We had them during COVID, and I was building this predator empire at that time. And exactly what you said, life does get in the way. And what we realized at that point is they're really little right now, right? They're not going to remember this part. Let me go really hard in building this. Let me put my head down and focus, and together we'll deal with the baby end of it. Because dealing with babies is always fun. And right now I'm in a position, they're 7 now, where I get to spend more time with them. And these are the memories they're going to run. But I'm not stuck here creating systems and out and getting I've already done the work. So you need to pick a partner that not only complements you and supports you, but absolutely supports you. And you realize at some point in your career that dynamic will flip and your partner will focus on. But make sure you get that choice right. Take your time on that one, because that decision will single-handedly define the rest of it.
Thank you. And on that note, thank you very much. I hope we can have you back on, another time. We were talking about other things.
Anytime.
I really appreciate your time. And I think you've given us some, great advice and a lot to think about. So thank you, UJ.
Thank you.
Okay.